About paramedics, and they are key providers for urgent and emergency care. Their role connects them to public health, public safety and social care, and their role has had considerable development in the last few decades. They carry the responsibility to provide patients with and service users with treatment that is most appropriate for them, and they're the first point of contact with a health professional. And like the same as many other healthcare professions at the moment, there is a high level of staff shortages. So there was a survey carried out by the Observer magazine where it surveyed 10 NHS regions, and there was over 1,000 vacancies. 350 vacancies were in the London area alone, and 7 other regions had 1,000 vacancies. And this was spread from the North East, East of England, North West and Yorkshire. So, I'm going to look at some of the experienced paramedics. They're a group of professionals that have served many years, and some years as paramedics, and taken on further education and training. They work in a specialist field, and we've got the hazardous area response team. They work in contaminated areas, around water, at heights and in confined spaces. After 5 years of being a paramedic, you can then go on to further training, which enables them to have greater practice, and you'll become a specialist and then an advanced paramedic. And then you can go on to get a doctorate and be a consultant paramedic, which will give you greater knowledge and understanding of the clinical practice, and they'll provide you more pragmatic knowledge of methods in research, as well as evidence-based practice with clinical care at an expert level. So, incredibly, the paramedics at St John's Ambulance Trust, or St John's, they set up a hospital to care for sick pilgrims in the 11th century in Jerusalem. Then in 1887, St John's Ambulance Brigade was formed, and then in 1914, in World War I, it brought about the Joint War Committee, which was the Red Cross and the St John's Ambulance Service coming together to treat and care for casualties of war in both England and overseas. And then in 1948 the NHS was formed, and that had an impact on the ambulance service, where they were able to disroute ambulances to places where they needed the additional support. So the modern paramedic is highly trained, and as a role they have evolved with the training that comes with it, and you need to go to university now, and by I think it's 2021 they won't accept anything other than the university degree to get you into paramedic science. And paramedics now try and treat and cure as many patients as possible at home, so they don't have to take them to the A&E department, because it just frees up room. They don't have to do it, they won't. They will also look at referring patients to departments with specialist care, bypassing the A&E department again. So paramedics work in a multidisciplinary team that enables them to deliver a better service to patients, and it creates a good working profession. They work alongside other service users or providers, and that can deliver a greater font of knowledge and give greater safety to the patients and the professionals. So we've got the full intervention team, where the paramedics will work with occupational therapists and physiotherapists. So if someone's had a fall at home, then you'll have a physiotherapist going in to look at the patient, see what they can do to help them increase the mobility. And then you've got the occupational therapist that will look at the area where they live. Is there any additional equipment that can be accessed for them to give them greater mobility, increasing their freedom and independence? And then we've got the 999 emergency services, where paramedics will work alongside the police and the fire. So say you've got a road collision, you'll have the fire service potentially going there to cut people out of cars, put out any fires. The police will be there to maintain order with traffic, check if there's any evidence to see who was at fault with the incident. Then the paramedics will come along, treat patients. They might have to then take patients off to hospital. If it's a serious injury, they will phone through to the A&E department to tell the doctors and nurses there to get ready for this patient. So it's a huge team that they've got to work with. So experienced paramedics, they have additional training which gives them greater knowledge of where they can refer patients to. With this knowledge, it can gives additional support to patients and provides a greater level of support which decreases the patients going into the A&E department. So some of these, we've got mental health, GPs, midwives, pharmacies there, the clinical assessments, and then you've got direct referrals, which is the alcohol, diabetes and the falls. So if you look at the slides that I've given you, this is to do with elderly people and having a fall. And it's a bit of a clinical protocol that enables paramedics to assess the individual, and then they can refer them to the community falls service. This protocol provides paramedics with the tools to assess patients, and if deemed appropriate, they can leave the patient at home or at the scene with the referrals of the falls team. The full service will make contact with the patient over the following week, and hopefully then will take over the continuation of the care for patient. So, professional boundaries. Paramedics can attend patients in very stressful and traumatic situations when there's no one else around. They are their only kind of port of call. Paramedics go into people's homes. It's a very vulnerable situation. So all through this, paramedics need to make sure that they are upholding their professional boundaries. Let's see here. So can you have all your stuff after you die? Paramedics could quite happily go into someone's home and just look at everything. If that person dies, what's stopping them from taking it? You've got to have high professional boundaries with it. So then we go on to policies. Paramedics have policies that shape the way they work, and it's set out by the Healthcare Professionals Council, standards of proficiencies. Now, paramedics have proficiencies as their role is so diverse, and it makes it tricky to set a strict set of policies. Paramedics must know the limits of their practice, and they need to seek advice if they are unsure. They need to be able to work safely in challenging and unpredictable environments and work in the best interest of the service users. At all times, understanding the relationship of the service users should be based on mutual respect and trust, and ensuring that they don't discriminate. So at the moment, we have 11 NHS ambulance trusts in England, Wales and Scotland, and in 1948 it became a public duty to provide ambulance service to everyone that needed it. In 2001, emergency care was reformed, and it saw improvements in response times because it was increasing the funding for frontline staffing and the vehicles. But then in 2002, the ambulance services were caught manipulating the response times to be met, and this was all because of ambitious government targets. So in 2011, we had the care quality indicators, and they were introduced, and they covered service experience of patients. They also covered the proportion of calls that were being managed and that were closed with telephone advice or without people being transported to A&E. They also looked at the call abandonment rate, making sure that call operators answered calls to 909 before it was abandoned. And then they looked at the response time for ambulance teams to get to a person in need or emergency care, and it had to be within the 8 minutes. So, as a paramedic, it's a protected title, but anyone that wants to call themselves a paramedic has to be registered and trained, and they have to register with the Health Professionals Council and adhere to their professional and ethical standards that they prescribe. The Care Quality Commission regulates the legislation that paramedics must work to and in the parameters of. So a few of them are, we've got the Mental Health Act, because paramedics have to assume that the patient has capacity and that they have their own right to make that capacity, and they cannot treat them as if they don't have that capacity unless all practical steps have been made and they're not getting anywhere. They also have the Equalities Act, and this is to treat everyone equally and without discrimination, and it goes hand in hand with workplace and society. So with ethics, it can be considered the same as a moral code that someone has, and it's very subjective. Paramedics are required to make rapid decisions, and they can sometimes have to put ethical consideration to one side, making clinical decisions and under a clinical guideline. But they're rarely ever seen as with ethical decisions. We had Bergkamp and Childress, the principles of ethics, and that is respect for autonomy, where this is making sure that we're looking at the decisions about the treatment as being done respectfully, and it's what the person potentially wants. Non-maleficence and beneficence, and then just doing what's right for the patient. So, what effect does legislation, policies, politics, and ethics have on paramedics? Well, they have good ones because it sets safe boundaries for patients and paramedics. Paramedics have things to work towards that keeps them safe, but it also has the negative side of the politics, where they are setting out quotas and efficiencies for timings and everything. And you've got to kind of question, how effective can a paramedic be if in the back of their mind they're just thinking about how many people they've got to see or how quickly they've got to get to a person. So I handed out questionnaires to people, and sorry, you can't see them that clearly, it is quite low. How fast do you have to get to a scene? 8 to 10 minutes. Kind of further up, I can't even read that, that's quite bad. Then, on average, how many patients do you have to attend in a shift? And then, what breaks do you think you get? And this was in comparison of an article that I read, and the article went on to say that in the past they would work to help about 5 to 6 people, and now it's jumped up to 11 to 12 in a shift, which is a lot of patients to get to if you're doing a 12-hour shift. It also went on to say that breaks, you can go 6 to 7 hours without a break, and there are people that will go a whole 12-hour shift without anything, and even a toilet break will be put on hold just because of helping a person, because a person's life is better than a toilet break. We've got to put it in perspective. But then we've got the 8-minute target response time, where the government and the policies that they have set will see if someone gets to a patient within the 8 minutes, that person dies, you've passed. But if you get to that person within 8 minutes and 1 second and you've saved them, you failed. How is that fair? So, expectations of a paramedic from kind of the public's perception. You kind of look at all these are potential calls that you'd get. 4 days old, she's not breathing, I've been stabbed, can you help? Where would you go to first? Who would you see last? What priority order would you put them in? The public's expectations of paramedics is that they should arrive shortly after the phone call is being placed. They don't think about all the other calls that are coming in at the same time, or how many paramedics are out there. They're just thinking of themselves, which, you do. But in reality, the budget cuts, the pressure on targets, the lack of frontline staffing, there just isn't enough paramedics out there to see everyone in time. And that is where I conclude. Thank you very much.
Excellent.